Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to eCommerce Mastery. Today we are talking to Jess Chan, founder and CEO of Longplay. Jess, how you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you?
I am doing wonderful, and I cannot wait to dive into all of the awesome nuggets of wisdom that we have today for these wonderful people. So, Jess, we talked a little bit before we hopped on this of kind of breaking down the episode like this. We're going to dive into your story. We're going to hear about your rise to greatness, your rise to mastery, and all the wonderful things that you've done. Then we'll tackle the three main building blocks of building relationships at scale. Super powerful, sounds really awesome, is way more awesome than it sounds if done correctly. Then we're going to talk about our main call to action, which will give everybody who's listening, it will give you the highest ROI and easiest thing you can do to start off with. So you have to stick with us to the end to hear that CTA. And then at the very end, we will have one more nugget of wisdom. So without any further ado, Jess, welcome to the show. I love to hear your story.
Yeah, where to begin? So, right now where I'm at is I'm the founder and CEO of Longplay. We're a full service email marketing agency where we work with e-commerce brands, really just solely focused on email marketing. We work with brands anywhere from, hey, we're just starting up, we're launching, getting things going, all the way up to, we've been around for 5 years and we're doing $100 million in revenue. So really, it's been fantastic being able to kind of see the spectrum and see the behind the scenes and work with all these founders and CMOs of brands at every stage of their e-commerce journey. The funny thing is that I actually started with a degree in actuarial science and economics. So really, as probably far away from marketing as humanly possible, not the most creative of professions. So that was my actual degree. And then kind of went through like a year or so of exploring different avenues, realizing that I probably don't want to be stuck in a cubicle cranking out spreadsheets in an insurance company for the rest of my life. So I went through a year of, testing out everything from UI UX design to development, everything in between. And I kind of stumbled into a marketing assistant job for a 7-figure e-commerce company called Best Self Co. And I remember being at a hackathon, being on Facebook, slacking away as usual, and seeing a Facebook ad come in, signed up for the email newsletter, and they ended up having their job posting come in through that email newsletter. So it's almost kind of like we went full circle. So I started that marketing assistant job, complete imposter syndrome, as we've all probably felt before, because I knew nothing about marketing, knew nothing about e-commerce, just didn't really know how I got the job or why I was here, but like, hey, let's do it. And I still remember my first task was, hey, we really want to start doing like an email, like a proper email newsletter. Can you do that for us? Like, okay, cool. And I still remember typing into Google, how to email e-commerce. And that was kind of like the humble beginnings. So that's kind of where I started. And then I was an assistant for probably 8 months while I was still in college in my 4th year. And when I graduated, they promoted me to a chief marketing officer, which I remember at the time felt like the world's most unqualified promotion. Imposter syndrome was at a high. But just kind of, I think a lot of entrepreneurs have gone through this where you're just like, hey, let's just do the thing and walk into the opportunity and then we'll figure it out as we go, like build the airplane as you're flying it. So I was actually at Best Self as their CMO for probably, I think, 3.5 years roughly, and actually didn't leave until late last year. But along the way, learned everything there was around e-commerce, or as much as you possibly can, as it's changing all the time. And Longplay actually started pretty organically with me going to entrepreneur events, and I was talking to other founders and CMOs, and they're kind of asking us what we were doing on the email side. So I was just kind of giving them like, hey, here's a crash course. Like, here are the 3 things I would do after you leave this conference if you want to get your email marketing going. And then they ended up kind of calling me a month later and just asking if I could could they just hire me to do the thing? I'm like, well, I wasn't really planning on starting an agency, but like, let's just say yes. We'll figure it out later. So just kind of really grew organically. So we still haven't really done any marketing up to this day. We've been around for just over a year now. And it's all been very organic, word of mouth growth. Left my position as CMO last year, and it's a fantastic company, amazing team. It really felt like family, but it was kind of like time to move on and really saw the potential with Longplay. So here we are a year later. We started with, I still remember my first hire. I was doing copy and design and email copywriting and implementation all by myself. And now we have a team of, I believe, 18 people now. That number might have changed since I last checked. And here we are. It's been a crazy journey for the last 2 years.
That is amazing. That's amazing. I love how you started from this place of, I'm not really sure why I'm here or what I'm doing. And it seems like you built this experience and you built this skill set through intense Googling and doing it and seeing what worked. And then because you were so good at it, then people started asking you like, hey, take my money and help me make more money, with email. I love that. I love that. And the fact that your agency has grown as much as it has through just word of mouth, I mean, that is almost a testament in and of itself to how effective your strategies are. I love that. I love that. So can we kind of hone in here on this idea of building relationships at scale? And I'm really interested in learning where you got that from. Like where did this concept come from? Why is it so important? And I really want to set the stage of how it came about, why it's so important, so that once we dive into the three main building blocks of that, we have more context and it's more relevant and it's more meaningful.
Yeah, for sure. So what I found is that one, when I first started long play, it was honestly one of those moves that I'm like, hey, I think this will be fun. I think I'll learn a lot from it. But there's all these email marketing agencies out there. So we're just gonna, carve out our piece of the pie and we're doing what everybody else is doing. And as we're like kind of sailing the ship, I'm like, there's a full blue ocean here. And you kind of start getting that fear of like, either something really terrible happened here and that's why no one is here, or we struck gold. And what I find is a lot of brands and agencies approach email marketing just as this channel to like blast people. And they don't really see it as every other marketing channel. Like you wouldn't approach marketing in e-commerce as, hey, let's just like get as many customers as possible and turn them out and just take their money. There's some businesses that are run like that. But I'm guessing if you want to start an e-commerce business that has longevity and has a strong relationship with customers, you're really thinking about, hey, what product can I produce to solve a pain point? How do I want to communicate with my customers? How do we want them to speak about us? How do we want to resonate with them? And how do we retain them for as long as possible by building a relationship with them? And that's really the approach that you approach overall marketing with. So the thing is, we're really just approaching email the way you should be approaching marketing, rather than seeing it as like some channel to blast things out of. So I see email as one, this is the most direct channel that you can possibly have to communicate with your customers. Facebook ads is fantastic. Google is fantastic. Influencers are fantastic, and they're all absolutely needed. But those are very much about reach. Email is the only one where you can literally pick out a single customer on your platform and say like, hey, Beth, really want to speak to you and get to know you directly. So when we're approaching email, we're really thinking about, hey, if I was to reach out to Beth, this customer who's bought from me 3 times, what would I want to say to her in an email? And how do I want to communicate with her individually? And then it's just a matter of building strategies to kind of take a step back and say, okay, who is Beth like? What does that bucket look like? Who are the 10,000 other customers that are really similar to Beth? And then who are the 10,000 other customers who are really similar to David? And finding what some of those customer personas are, and really just kind of scaling through strategy and bucketing your customers. But at the end of the day, it really comes down to, how would I want to build a relationship with a single customer as a brand? And how do I do that at scale with my customers through email marketing?
So is it more like, and I know I'm deviating a little bit, but I think there's a lot of confusion here amongst the e-commerce people of the world. But when you're saying actually building that relationship and speaking to that customer one-on-one, or building that email to speak with that customer one-on-one, even if it's going to 11,000 customers or 11 million customers, what sort of tone or like wording are you using? Is it more of, hey Beth, you know, the because you know how there's marketing speak. It's like, these are the 4 things that you should never do for this or that or the other thing. And it feels kind of cheesy, but then, you know, the same email that you might send like your grandma or something, you probably wouldn't want to send about. So like, where's the happy medium there? If there is a happy medium, and like, how do you not go into like the classic marketing speak that everybody's like, oh gosh, no. But then like, how do you avoid getting too personal? Like, what's your take on that?
Yeah, great question. So one thing that I actually do want to bring up first is the difference between direct response and kind of like e-commerce email marketing. I find that they get bucketed together, but they're actually 2 totally different industries. So direct response marketing is kind of like that, more of that traditional marketing speak that you would think of. So it's like 4 ways to not die if you use a supplement, and you know, you have all the death pictures or like that kind of thing. And that's very like we just want to get your money, hit them hard, get that fear, urgency, like all the traditional marketing tactics of like fear, urgency, we're running out of supplies, all that kind of stuff. For us, I always describe our emails kind of like, they almost look like websites. They're like Instagrammy, branded, graphic design heavy, relatively shorter copy, relatively light. And it's really about how it makes the customer feel. So we don't really do kind of like plain text stuff. So really want to differentiate between the two. In terms of personalization, just to kind of get back to your question, there's kind of a couple of things that you would really personalize based off of using things like names are pretty like basic areas of personalization that honestly I think it's a great tactic, but it's not a strategy. The strategy is really around what characteristics of the customer or behaviors have they indicated that make you need to speak to them differently. So it's more around, hey, suggesting them different products based on where they've come in from, what products they've viewed before, what products they've purchased before. The other thing that I actually love as well is doing some kind of like founder style letters. And that's a great way of having copy that is almost like written to your grandma, but it's coming in this like organic, authentic, branded way. And things like that are more critical to the strategy of speaking to your customer one-on-one than necessarily, you know, just putting in their name and doing a plain text email. In terms of the tone and branding, that's really so dependent on different brands. For some of them, for example, if you just looked at a single email, you might not be able to tell it's personalized, but what makes it personalized is really the fact that 5 different people are going to get 5 different emails with different product suggestions or different types of blocks, depending on, you know, what we know that they're interested in.
Interesting. So it seems like your style is more of, hey, let me give you an experience. Let me tug at those heartstrings and let me make you feel a certain way, or help you feel a certain way, as opposed to, here's my product, buy my product. And then when you do make a product recommendation, that's where the personalization comes in, because there's something that they did or some page that they went to or some previous email that they clicked or some previous link that they clicked that would then suggest to you, the email sender, hey, this customer wants this, that, or the other product.
For sure. And other examples of personalization might be, you know, we have brands that usually have a charity element. So some people love that charity element. They want to know that entire story, and that's really critical to the purchasing process. Some people are like, hey, that's great. Glad you're doing that. I just need to know. Just give me the product. Give it to me at a discount, and I just want the information. So those are examples of like curated experiences. And actually, I like the term probably curated experience is probably a better way to encapsulate what you're trying to do in terms of building relationships at scale rather than personalization, because personalization kind of indicates more of like adding in your name and that kind of stuff, which is, again, more tactical than strategic.
Awesome. I love that. I love that. Okay, so now that we have this context, I would love to really jump into these 3 main building blocks of building relationships at scale.
Yeah, for sure. So first one is really around setting your goals for email. I find when we ask people what their email goals are, that it's usually, hey, I'd really like to send more emails, which is a fantastic objective. But we want to make sure that email is just a single channel in your business. And at the end of the day, the job is to build your business. and use email as a vehicle to do that versus kind of having email as its own entity. So first one is, hey, what kind of goals do we want to set for email? Second building block is around the idea of how to see opportunities in your existing email marketing, even if you're doing nothing, or if you already have a full email program. What are some of those gaps that you're looking for? And third piece is the implementation, which is where I find most brands and agencies can sometimes fall short, because of all the channels, email is probably one of the channels that take the most heavy lifting, take a lot of resources to get it done right. Whereas things like Facebook ads, you can kind of have just like one person writing out some copy, throwing an image there. It's really about the targeting. Same thing with Google. You can kind of have one person doing it. Whereas for email, you really need a whole team. You need copy, design, implementation, reporting. There's just a lot more that kind of goes into that. So 3 big building blocks I want to talk about here is 1, setting your goals and making sure that overall you're using email as a vehicle to grow your business and not just sending out emails for the sake of it, because you should be. Second one is how to seize those opportunities in your existing email program. And third piece is around the idea of how do you implement as quickly as possible without it being too big of a strain on your team.
Perfect. So let's jump into, if we can, a little bit more depth. The very first one, which is the goal setting and making sure to align your email goals with your business goals.
For sure. So yeah, like I mentioned, most people's goals is, hey, we just want to send out more emails, which doesn't really set an objective for which area of email you want to be focusing on. You know, there's flows, there's campaigns, and also doesn't really give you any sort of like starting roadmap on types of emails that you want to be sending out in the content. So the first thing we always ask when we bring a new client is just, hey, what are your business goals for the next 6 months? And also, where's your business headed vision wise for the next 3 to 5 years? And that gives us both a short-term and a long-term roadmap. So short-term, we usually get things like, hey, I want to increase revenue. Okay, cool. That's still pretty broad. And really, there's only 3 ways to grow revenue in any business. 1, you're going to increase the total number of customers. 2, you're going to increase your total average order value. So how much each customer is spending each time they purchase from you. And the third piece is how many times a customer purchases from you over the lifetime of this customer and your relationship with them. So those are like really the only 3 levers you can ever pull in a business to increase revenue. So at least helps us narrow it down. If a business is just starting, usually the KPI is, hey, we just want to increase the total number of customers. So it's about that kind of top of funnel area. We just want to focus on converting as many leads to customers as possible. We're not too worried about having, $200 purchases. We just want to get that first order, get them to pull out their wallet and change the relationship with you from, hey, this is a brand I know, to this is a brand I've purchased from. So that's kind of like bucket number 1. Second one is, hey, I want to increase my average order value. And that's probably one of the hardest ones because it's so subtle. But increasing average order value really means, hey, I want to build more trust with my customers, that they're willing to spend a little bit more upfront. That might mean that, hey, I've tried your product before, now I'm willing to invest. That might mean being able to communicate the value proposition and the long-term effects of your product and things like that. So second one is average order value. And then third piece is going to be about getting your customers to purchase from you multiple times. Tied into that could also be, hey, I want my customers to recommend more people to come to me. So maybe your product is naturally a one-off purchase. People probably don't buy 10 mattresses over 2 years. But you can still extend the lifetime value. I guess you can't see my air quotes on a podcast. But you want to extend lifetime value of your customer just by building in kind of more referral mechanism. So these are kind of like the 3 big buckets of KPIs that we want to at least break it down into. You're either trying to retain your customers for longer, get them to make multiple purchases, or refer a friend. Second one is you want to increase the amount of money they're spending with you each time. Or third piece is you just want to increase your total number of customers. So really getting aligned on that. I kind of break it down into, the usual top of funnel, middle of funnel, or bottom of funnel. So what's your priorities there and what do you want to work on? And that's kind of the beginning of making sure that your email goals are aligned with your business goals. And then from there, you can kind of hone in on what type of flows, what types of campaigns, and the strategy around email marketing.
So I love how you broke down the three levers to pull to increase that revenue. And it seems like for a lot of businesses, that's very clearly going to be the main business goal there, or one of the main business goals that they want to align with their email marketing efforts, or their
Yeah.
email marketing goals. But is it always that? And how do they determine which of their business goals, because they may have a few, how do they determine what is the right business goal to align with their email marketing goals specifically for their business?
Yeah, for sure. So I usually find businesses at different stages will focus on one of the three. So startups are generally, hey, I want to increase my total number of customers. Or if things like VC-backed firms where they're scaling, those ones are usually very, very heavily focused on, hey, just want to increase my total number of customers and or lifetime value. So that's usually the first stage. If you're like relatively narrow between like 0 to 2 years, maybe 0 to 3, you're still kind of focused on that piece. After that, you're a little bit more focused on average order value, kind of like years 2 to 4-ish maybe. And then the ones who are really thinking long term, the ones who are like, hey, I've been around for 3 to 5 years, but we're going for like 20. We're a brand that's here to stay. Those are the ones who are really diving deep into lifetime value. So really kind of understanding just which stage of business you're naturally in as your business matures. The second piece is I like to really just kind of map out your ideal customer journey and where some of those bottlenecks are. So one of the things that we do when we bring on a new brand, usually when they've been around for a good amount of time, so they have enough data to map things out, we'll usually map out their key customer milestones, which is pretty straightforward. It's usually, hey, they join their list, they make their first purchase, they make their second purchase, they make their third purchase, they subscribe, they are at risk of churn, and then eventually when they leave. So we kind of map out these key 5 to 6 customer journey points. And then at each stage we'll map out, hey, you might have 1 million people on your list. 200,000 of them have made their first purchase. Out of that 200,000, 100K has made their second purchase. And out of that, 50K are subscribers. And out of all of that, maybe 250K are at risk of churn. So when I can't do all this math in my head, but basically when you map this all out, you're going to get numbers per bucket, and then you're going to get conversion rate. So you're going to say, okay, if I have 200K purchasers on my 1 million person list, I have a 20% conversion rate from people who've joined my list to making that first purchase. And then from there, if I have 100K people who have made their second purchase, then I know of a 50% conversion rate to once someone has made their first purchase. So just those two numbers alone tells me that, hey, it's really likely that when someone makes their first purchase, they're going to make their second purchase. So really where the biggest bottleneck in your business is probably getting people to make that first purchase. So let's just focus on that area of the bottleneck and put all of your efforts there, whether it's flows or campaigns, and really target the non-purchasers on your list, because that's where the biggest ROI is going to be.
Wow. It really seems like having a firm grasp, like a firm statistical grasp of your numbers and your business, of like, what are your numbers? How many people are in each bucket? It seems like that's really important, because then you understand, okay, well, which piece of this whole journey is going to give me the biggest increase if I tackle that and solve that piece or that problem, or make that part of the business better. It's really fascinating how it seems like you almost need to look at it from like an actuarial scientist point of view to really break down, like, okay, well, where can I have the most impact with the smallest amount of effort?
Yeah, for sure. It's funny that I remember looking back and I was like, I just don't want to be cranking out spreadsheets all the time. And now I probably spend most of my time in spreadsheets, just looking at the data. But yeah, I'd say that's kind of like the basics of make sure you know where your customers lie. And this kind of actually touches on building block number 2, which is like seeing where some of those opportunities are once you kind of know your business goals. So really understanding where some of those bottlenecks are, and understanding kind of, I always call it just like the distribution of your customers, or the distribution of your list, in terms of like, where are those heat maps? Like I want to find the red zones where it's like, if we could just make this red zone a yellow zone, if we can convert 50% more of these people who aren't converting, that that impact isn't just, hey, we've converted 50% more customers, because 50% of those customers are going to go on to make their third purchase. So really understanding kind of the residual effects of the impact that you're making by targeting some of those specific bottlenecks. The other types of data that I really like from an email marketing standpoint, just marketing strategy, is knowing your churn risk, or just kind of your lapse point. So lapse point is kind of the day that if that person hasn't purchased from you by this point, they're probably not going to purchase from you again. That lapse point is going to be different for different brands. But for example, with a supplement brand where, there's a 30-day supply, your lapse point might be anywhere between 60 to 90 days. So if someone's bought from you once and then they don't buy another bottle from you within 90 days, you probably have lost them as a customer, and you're going to want to bring them back before then. So, and that helps guide your marketing strategy, especially through email, where you have a 90-day window from when they first purchase from you to when they might leave. And within that 90-day window, you really want to focus on capitalizing on getting that second purchase, or getting them to refer a friend, or things like that.
So I want to put myself into the shoes of an e-commerce store owner. And, I'm hearing all this great information about email marketing, and we're just touching on the first building block of the 3 of building relationships at scale. And already I might be thinking, whoa, I feel like I am like getting a PhD right now in email marketing, and this is a whole lot of information, and I might be feeling a little bit lost. So just kind of go on a quick tangent here. How much of this stuff does the owner of the business, the e-commerce store owner, the entrepreneur, how much of this stuff does the entrepreneur really need to like study and master, versus what do they need to know to be dangerous to the point where they can then have a conversation with somebody who might be able to help them, or even be able to hire the right team member to be able to kind of hand off this responsibility? Like, how much do they really need to know?
Yeah, great question. So I'd say honestly between years like 0 to 2, all of this is kind of, it's like good to know, but it's not going to make a move. The 0 to 2, it's like, just get the foundations right. Just focus on doing everything you need to do to get some revenue, try out different strategies. Unless you're scaling crazy quickly, 0 to 2 is like, you don't really have enough data for it to really be meaningful and to study it. And I always say, like, if you have terrible data or minimal data that you're extrapolating info from, that's probably worse than having no data at all, because now you think you know things that are probably untrue. So 0 to 2 is like, just do all the things. Just move quickly, launch that first email, send out some campaigns, which we'll chat about during the implementation building block conversation. And don't worry too much about only doing the right things, because that's where I see a lot of entrepreneurs get stuck in the early years. They're like, I want to make sure I want to make the right moves. And the reality is, you don't really know what the right moves are until you make the mistakes and realize, hey, that tactic just doesn't work. Let's try something new. So actually, I find 0 to 2 the biggest mistake, and I know people hate hearing this, biggest mistake that people make from year 0 to 2 is just not doing email marketing at all, because they're trying to do it so right that they don't ever get started. So first one is just launch a few flows, which we'll chat about in implementation. After year 0 to 2, and you're like, hey, it's firm, we really do have some significant customer data, and we're looking to kind of take our business to the next level. Curious to know is, like, as an entrepreneur, you should probably know your heat maps and where those bottlenecks are. So you should know, hey, we have an issue with our repeat purchaser rate, or we have an issue with churn, or we have an issue with converting first purchasers. As long as you kind of know what those key bottlenecks are, then you can really focus on diving in to those ones and ignoring the rest of your broader customer journey. Obviously not completely putting it aside, but just zooming in a little bit. And then from there, you can really have a little bit deeper conversations around, hey, what kind of data do we need to make a decision? And who do I need to talk to kind of hone in on this problem? My approach is really around, hey, find the problem and then just start solving it, and then you'll kind of learn the things later, versus, hey, let me gather all of the knowledge and all of the data and then figure out what we need to do. Because I find that just takes a lot of time.
I think that's great advice. That's really great advice. And it's actually a perfect segue into the second building block, which I would appreciate if we could move into now, of really identifying those gaps in your existing email marketing program and what are those low-hanging fruit, those easy wins, those layups to hit?
Yeah, for sure. So with your email program, there's kind of two elements. One is like the high level revenue goal. Two is email marketing can be broken down into really just three things: your list, your campaigns, and your flows. That's really all there is to email marketing. So first off, we always set an overall target of having 30% of your revenue coming from email. That's just like the easiest number just to kind of hook onto to know what the gaps are. So for example, if you log into, hopefully you're using Klaviyo, if you're kind of on eCommerce and using Shopify as well, Klaviyo is going to be a great platform for you. But if you log into Klaviyo and you're seeing like, hey, I have 20% of my revenue coming from email, then you could just kind of hone in on the 10%. Like the opportunity is, hey, I want to close that gap and get that 10% extra. Maybe that's 10K, maybe that's 100K, but you're really focusing on just carving out that 10% and slowly clocking things up. The next question is, hey, we need to close this gap and get an extra 10% of revenue coming from email. Where is that revenue going to come from? It's either going to come from campaigns or it's going to come from flows. So from there, we generally shoot for roughly between 10 to 15% coming from flows, and roughly between 15 to 20% coming from campaigns. So that kind of gives you a good map of usually one or the other is a little bit weaker. So if you have 20% coming from email, you might have 5% coming from campaigns and 15% coming from flows. Cool. So let's focus our attention solely on campaigns. So if we're speaking about campaigns specifically, usually there's really only like 2 to 3 buckets of types of campaigns you could send out. One is like promotions and product launches, which most clients do. Second one is kind of content emails, and third one is newsletters. I personally hate newsletters. I find they're a little bit too business centric. And my perspective on this is like, hey, you're sending out a newsletter about your business, and customers don't really care about your business. They care about what you can do for them. So I really like to focus really on promotions and product launches or content emails. What I find is, one, if you're not making a lot of revenue from campaigns, we might just not be sending out enough campaigns. So we usually shoot for anywhere between 2 to 3 campaigns per week for customers. So first one is like, hey, if you can increase the cadence, that's great. I think a lot of e-commerce owners worry about sending emails too often. And not that email or not that worry is like ungrounded in any way, but it's definitely good to test. So if you're sending 1 campaign out for a week, try 2, try 3, see how your engagement rates look, see how your revenue looks. The other thing I usually see is people only sending out promotions and product launches emails. So you're kind of always spamming your list with, hey, we have a sale. Hey, buy the thing. Hey, buy the thing. Hey, buy the thing. And from a customer standpoint, I'm always thinking like, hey, if I went up to someone and like every time I saw their friend, they're like, hey, can you do this thing for me? Hey, can you do this thing for me? That'd be really great. I'm like, I don't want to see you anymore. This is like a terrible relationship. So, and that's kind of the effect of like when you're constantly sending promotion emails. So what I like to do is balance it out with weekly content emails, which one are just like this fantastic, sustainable, long-term strategy that you can really implement. And 2, it's fantastic from the customer relationship building channel. So if you're already publishing blog posts, the easiest way is really start creating emails that kind of act as a hook for your blog post. And then you can always pepper in some product mentions. Usually we'll kind of have like a little product block at the bottom of the email for products that would be relevant to the content themselves. So examples of different content campaigns that you can kind of send out are one like lifestyle topical content that might be relevant to your audience. So for example, we have one client that sells sustainable clothing, and their audience is people who really care about environmentally friendly products, sustainable products, how the products is made, and just kind of like self-care, self-love. So we send out a lot of content emails around like, hey, 10 tips to show yourself love this weekend, or like 5 ways to grow a home garden, things like that. These are like very just natural topical things that your customers are really going to care about and aren't too sales focused. And just send out like 1 or 2 of those campaigns a week, and you're going to see the revenue come in. Usually they're probably around 60 to 70% of a promotion email, but sometimes we've also seen some content emails beat promotion emails. So kind of long story short is like, hey, look at how much revenue is coming from your email marketing. If it's under 30%, only goal is just close that gap. We just want to get up to 30, and kind of see where the highest ROI is. Do you want to focus more on campaigns, or do you want to focus more on flows? If you want to focus more on campaigns, easiest way is, hey, start sending out some content emails, or just kind of up the frequency of your campaigns, because you're likely not sending too many emails. And that frequency increase alone will increase your revenue before you really need to do like crazy optimization or anything like that.
I love how almost systematic and meticulous the strategy is. It seems like you've really broken it down in almost like a decision tree. Like if you are here, then your options are either left, center, or right, each corresponding, to a certain course of action. And it's really almost like identifying, okay, this is the optimal next step to take, or at least this is the optimal direction to move into to figure out that next step. I love that. And I love how you broke it down and made it so easy to understand, like, okay, well, if you are in this spot, if this is you, okay, here's what you need to be thinking about. And then if you're in this middle section, here's what you need to be thinking about, and so on and so forth. That's brilliant. Is that something that you came up with through your experience, or like how did you develop such a precise decision tree type of approach to this?
First off, I love the decision tree visual, because I think that's actually the perfect analogy to explain how a lot of e-commerce entrepreneurs start off at like the bottom or the top branches, bottom branches, basically the twigs at the end, versus the trunk. So it's like, hey, we saw this article about how to like optimize subject lines. Do you guys use emojis? Like, we should do some emojis. I'm like, those are like, you're like so far down the twig. We need to focus on the core tree part. I'm like, you're focusing on emojis on subject lines, and you're not even sending enough campaigns, or you're just sending flash sales. And that's really the difference between strategy and tactics. I think that's a fantastic analogy to really explain where your focus should be. In terms of the framework itself, honestly, it's been trial and error. It's funny because this is probably the first time I've articulated it in this particular way. It's very like tribal knowledge, and just like things are ingrained in me now after having done it so many times for so many different clients. But definitely a very iterative approach. I remember when we started with our first client, for example, we used to do like, hey, the optimal welcome flow, we want to do 18 emails over like 45 days. So we used to write like 18 emails all at once. We also found like, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face, and I'd rather get punched in the face at 2 emails than 18 emails.
Right.
So things like that. It's like, hey, now let's do 2 emails for welcome flow. See how that goes, and then continue extending. So a lot of this framework has just been like honed in over time as we figured out things that work and don't work.
That's amazing. So we've talked about the first 2 building blocks, and I'd love to move us along to the third and final building block, which is about implementation.
Yeah, sounds great. So out of all the things, it's funny because I once heard the idea of like, hey, McDonald's is not a fast food restaurant, they're a property company. And it's like really getting down to like the core of what you really do as a company. And for us, honestly, sometimes I feel like we're not an email marketing company. We're solely like a project management ops company on just like, how do you produce emails? And that is the absolute hardest part of what we do. The strategy we can establish in 30 minutes, an hour, doesn't take too long. And the iteration is pretty seamless as well. It's solely the production of it. And that's really where I see a lot of clients get lost, because if you go talk to any email marketing agency, or you go online and look at email marketing plans, or even you might get off this podcast, you're like, okay, team, we have 50 flows that we need to build. Each one is going to be 10 emails. And here's the master plan that it's going to take us 2 years to get our email marketing completely done. And that's usually where people start. And they're like, well, we're just not going to do anything because we're never going to have the time for it. So with implementation, I always want to start off with just like, what's the no-brainer, like work that you can do that's going to take 20% of your time that will generate 80% of your effort. It's kind of the 80-20 Pareto's principle. Usually it's going to be flows. So I always find it's funny to me because every time I talk to clients, they always start off with campaigns, because that's what people talk about when they do email marketing. They're like, yeah, we send out email campaigns. But mentally, I'm like, why would you build a campaign when you can take the exact same amount of effort and build a flow that's now going to be evergreen and running automatically? So to me, flows are obviously a no-brainer of if you have no email marketing set up, or if you have very limited resources, very limited time, where should you focus your attention on? It's going to be flows. And you might not get kind of the fireworks of like, hey, we sent out an email and we got $20,000 back, but over the lifetime value of that email, you're going to get so much more back from that. So in terms of implementation, I always look at, hey, what's the first 1 or 2 flows that you should be building? And out of those flows, usually you'll see the first 1 or 2 emails generating most of that revenue. So really, you can get a lot done just building 4 emails, and that might move the needle a ton on your business already. If you're just getting started, the key flow is always the welcome flow. Most clients kind of have that done already. But really honing in on that. Second one is probably your post-purchase nurture flow. And that's after someone makes a purchase, and that's really just setting the groundwork for, one, make sure your customers don't feel neglected, like you're paying so much attention to them until they make a purchase, and then you're like, hey, bye, on to the next one. So I do still like the post-purchase nurture, even though it might not necessarily be the strongest revenue generating flow directly, making sure you're starting to nurture some of those customers. So welcome flow, post-purchase nurture are going to be your big 2. After that, the ones I like to focus most on are abandoned cart. So that's going to be, you can do 1 to 2 emails. We usually do 4 if you have the bandwidth for it. And that's going to be targeting anybody who has started checkout but didn't complete their purchase. And these are just very like, just like hot people in terms of like buyer intent. They've gotten so close, they like entered their billing information, they entered their name, they're just like somehow just didn't click checkout. Abandoned cart is always going to be kind of one of your higher revenue generating flows. From that, I love the win back flow as well. This is probably more important if you're more of an established business and you have customers to win back. We usually don't start with this if you're like a pretty new business, because just focus on the top funnel for now. But the win back flow targets people who, you know, haven't purchased in X amount of days, whatever your lapse point is. Generally, we'll kind of like set 60 days as a benchmark. These are people who have purchased from you before, they were interested, and they just haven't returned again. So let's target some of those people back. So that's going to be your top 4. And then from there, the 5th one is browse abandonment and or a replenishment cross-sell flow. So browse abandonment is, hey, people who viewed your product on site, kind of interested. Browse abandonment is about giving them that gentle nudge. And then the 6th one is your replenishment or cross-sell. And that's really just about reminding them to reorder. So replenishment is very natural for something like a supplement company. Or if you're more of like a jewelry brand or apparel brand, you wouldn't replenish your t-shirt, but you can cross-sell them on their next purchase. So between those 6, that pretty much covers the 80% of flows that's really going to generate massive revenue. And between those 6 flows, usually the first 1 to 2 emails generates the most revenue as well. So if you're kind of just doing the math, you can get pretty far with writing between 6 to 12 emails as a foundation. And if you just focus on, hey, we just need to write 6 to 12 emails, get those launched as quickly as possible, just treat it as a single project. I think that's the easiest way to approach email implementation. That's not going to make your team hate you or make you want to, poke your eyes out.
That is amazing. So I love how we've moved from the crash course PhD, let's learn these super critical building blocks of building relationships at scale, to now we actually have tangible things that we can do of setting some goals, identifying some really easy wins, these gaps in our existing program, if we have one. And if we don't have one, that's the gap right there. Mm-hmm. And then the third is we have some really, really basic flows that we can get up and running with between 6 to 12 emails. That is awesome. So Jess, I want to thank you so much for your time today. I do kind of want to ask for 2 more things before we hop off here, and I'm so appreciative of, of your time. One is I want to know that call to action. We talked about it a little bit with implementation, but I'd really love to just hammer home, like if we can leave this episode with one super duper critical action step that we can take, that if it's, whether it's today, hopefully it is today, or tomorrow morning, first thing when we get to the office, or first open our laptop, or first open our note thing on our phone to start writing, what's the one most important thing to take away and to do after hearing this episode?
Yeah, for sure. So I'd say main call to action is, if you are not really doing much email marketing, first thing to do is just pick one flow out of that 6 and write 2 emails and get that live. If you're already kind of doing email marketing and established, write 2 emails to build that flow to target that like biggest heat map, that red zone and bottleneck in your business. That's going to be the most important thing you can do to really start moving the needle.
Perfect. And the last thing that I want to ask is, what is one other nugget of wisdom, like a McDonald's chicken nugget of wisdom, shining lights, glowing, that we can take away from this episode, from all of your experience, all of the things that you've learned helping brands making hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue? What's that golden nugget of wisdom?
Yeah, so in my position, what I'm lucky to get to see is entrepreneurs and CMOs at different stages of their e-commerce business or journey, and also just seeing so many of them and being able to kind of see the differences. The biggest thing that I see that is the difference between the brands that scale and do really well and the ones who are kind of like always struggling a little bit is the focus on tactics versus strategy. So really start thinking long term, even though e-commerce moves fast and you're focusing on what are we doing this quarter, what are we doing for this year, we need to hit our revenue goals, still making sure that you're focusing on your long-term 5-year strategy and what would your business look like if you were trying to build a business that would exist for 100 years. Really thinking big and making sure you're focusing on the trunk of the tree rather than the tips and the tactics that people love to talk about and most podcasts are about, where it's really about like, what's that one thing, that silver bullet that you can do to triple your business this year. And the secret is, like, it doesn't really exist. Sometimes you stumble on it, but don't focus on finding the silver bullet. Really focus on the strategy that's going to help you grow your business over 5 years, 10 years, 15 years.
Awesome. Well, Jess, I want to thank you so much again for your time. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and your knowledge here. And yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks, Ben. It was great to be here.
Absolutely. To everybody who's listening and watching, I want to thank y'all very, very much. And I will see you on the next episode.